Hi there. Welcome to Believe It or Not, an Interfaith Grand River program. I'm your host, August Edelman, and I'm here with my friend Norm. Hi,
Hi,
Norm. Thanks for being on the show.
my pleasure.
So, I know who you are because we go to the same synagogue. But for the people at home, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Norm Finkelberg, and I'm a Jew. And I belong to Temple Shalom, which is a Reform Judaism congregation in Waterloo. Um, I grew up in Montreal, and we've been here in Waterloo region about 35 years, and we love it here.
What do you like to do when you're not here?
Right. Well, I believe in lifelong learning, and that includes the study of Torah, the Hebrew scriptures, and physical fitness. And right now, my passion is pickleball, and I enjoy nature as well.
Oh, lovely, lovely. So, can you tell me a little bit about your faith journey?
Sure. I'll just start off by saying that in my case, faith journey is maybe a bit of a misnomer for a couple of reasons. One is I would argue that Jewish tradition focuses much more on what you do and who you are rather than what you believe, and talk more about that later. And personally, I don't consider myself a person of faith. And in Judaism, again, uh, if you're born a Jew, you're pretty much a Jew, independent of what you might believe.
Yeah. So, if you would not consider yourself a person of faith, how would you describe yourself?
Well, as I said, I'm a committed Jew. Uh, Maybe I'll just give you a bit of background.
Yeah, please do.
So, as I said, I'm from Montreal, and raised in a large Jewish community. Um, our family was what I would call somewhat observant. And by observant, I mean observant of Jewish ritual and law. And what that means is, for our case, we observed a form of kashrut at home, which is the dietary laws of Judaism. We attended synagogue sporadically. We celebrated the major Jewish holidays. I went to a Hebrew day school, which means that for half the day we studied the public school curriculum. The other half of the day we were in Hebrew immersion and we studied um, Jewish law, Jewish tradition, Jewish language, of course, and um, and then when, as a male, when you reach the age of 13, you celebrate the bar mitzvah, which is a key life cycle event. It means that you are a full-fledged member of the Jewish community and that you're responsible to observe all the Jewish laws. Um, as happens with many young people, as an adolescent and a young adult, kind of drifted away from Judaism, although still strongly identifying as a Jew and celebrating the major Jewish holidays with my family. Um, and then sort of got drawn back to Judaism when we were in Waterloo region and we started a family.
Mhm.
We wanted our kids to have enough knowledge of Jewish tradition so that they'd be able to make an informed decision on their own about what to accept and what to reject. So we enrolled them in the Jewish day school, and then later joined Temple Shalom. And then a funny thing happened. I started attending services for my kids, but I got hooked. Um, Raising my voice in song and prayer became a meaningful experience for me. Not because I believed the words that I was praying or singing, um, but because, and not because I believed my prayers would be answered, but because of a sense of community
Mhm.
with my congregation, a sense of continuity with my ancestors, that these same words had been sung and chanted and read for millennia, and uh, and finally, because it gave me a sense of kind of grounded me and gave me a sense of mindfulness and gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
It sounds all very important to you, to have that sort of structure, I guess, and that connection.
Well, then, after being a member of Temple Shalom for a while, started to study Torah in a study group and became aware that the wisdom and ethical and moral guidance provided by the scriptures were important and meaningful. Um, then started studying Talmud, which is commentary by our sages about the scriptures, sort of an intergenerational rabbinic conversation that proceeded over centuries. And another thing I really appreciated about uh, that study is that there's room in Judaism for disagreement,
Mm-hmm.
and that the Talmud, for example, preserves minority opinions. And actually, the very meaning of the word Yisrael, Israel, is wrestling with God,
Yeah.
and the idea that we are encouraged to ask questions and that doubt is not an issue.
Mm-hmm. That's something I also love about our tradition. Yeah. I once heard someone describe the Talmud as the world's longest book report. It's being passed down from person to person. Um, so, how does Judaism impact your life?
Well, as I said, it's different than many other traditions in the sense that uh, if you're born a Jew, you're a Jew. Now, some Jews might argue with that, the ones who don't identify. Um, but from a real politic point of view, we have the lessons of, for example, the Shoah, the Holocaust, where it didn't matter if how you identified yourself. If you were identified by others as a Jew, then you suffered the consequences. Um, but as I said, I just I like studying in general, and I found that though I don't agree with much of it, that I found that the Hebrew scriptures, the Jewish scriptures, are a real source of wisdom,
Mm-hmm.
and uh, and I strongly identify with my community, and I strongly identified with the tradition. And at a certain point, one other thing that kind of changed my life was reading a certain book called Constantine's Sword
Yeah.
by James Carroll, and it who was a former Catholic priest, and he documents the long history of Christian anti-Judaism from
Mm-hmm.
Jesus to the present day, and um, and that really affected me because growing up in a large Jewish community, I was sort of buffered by that. I was aware that we were viewed as the other, and that certainly I was aware of the history of the Shoah, the Holocaust. But day to day, anti-Semitism didn't infringe on my life very much. But reading James Carroll's book really opened my eyes. It got me studying early Christianity, led to me being a member of a Jewish Christian study group, and ultimately led me to Interfaith Grand River, just because I feel that interfaith dialogue is so important.
Absolutely.
And so I guess I'd like people to consider that when you're not a member of the mainstream culture, it's not a level playing field.
Mm-hmm.
And in Waterloo Region, even though we have incredible diversity now, mainstream culture is still white and Christian. And so if there's a message that I'd like mainstream culture to consider is, um, even though I might look like you, even though I might sound like you, even though I share many of your secular humanist values, and even though I might appear to be a successful integrated member of the community, don't assume that I share your sense of belongingness, safety, and security.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And if I feel that way as a so-called invisible minority, imagine what it's like to be a visible minority.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a really profound way of looking at it. Yeah, I love that.
Well, I've thought about it a lot.
What is something that you've like struggled with?
Right. Well, I saw in one of the introductory questions, he said, have you ever struggled with your faith? And I would say, yes, constantly. Uh, again,
Definitionally.
yes, constantly. That's a good thing
Mm.
for me because, like everyone else, I struggle with the big questions in life and who are we? Why are we here? What happens when we're not here? Uh, you know, how can my life have meaning? Uh, so that's a constant struggle, and that's why I appreciate again, the wisdom that is available in my tradition to point, uh, point me in the right directions and, uh, and try and answer those questions.
Mhm. Is there anything that you'd like to sort of say to the folks at home? Any kind of message? You obviously had that beautiful, very profound piece about what it's like to be a
Right,
minority.
right. Um, sure. Uh, now, it's um, it's impossible. It's impossible to sum up Jewish tradition easily. But I'd like to share a midrash, which is
Yes, right, go ahead.
which is a rabbinic narrative that is one form of interpretation in Jewish tradition. And so Hillel, one of our greatest sages who lived in the first century BCE, was approached by a Gentile who was considering converting to Judaism. And the Gentile said to Hillel, I will accept your religion on one condition. If you can sum up the whole Torah for me while I stand on one foot. So instead of just sending him away and saying, well, that's crazy, Hillel's response to him was, what is hateful to you, do not do unto your neighbor. That is the whole teaching of the Torah. The rest is interpretation. Now go and study.
Mm,
And if there's one way of summing up Jewish tradition, I would do it that way.
absolutely. That's awesome.
Obviously, at Interfaith Grand River, we value dialogue,
Mm.
and I'd like to uh, share the 3 rules for interfaith dialogue that were devised by Christer Stendahl, who was a mid 20th century Swedish Christian theologian, and I think they apply beyond interfaith dialogue. They apply to having a conversation with the other, whoever that other is compared to you, because of how difficult that is in these times to do. So his first rule was when trying to understand another religion, you should ask the adherents of that religion and not its enemies. In other words, get it from the horse's mouth. Don't get it from your favorite silo source of news that you depend on. Number 2, don't compare your best to their worst. I would argue that all traditions have, shall we say, problematic texts that are
Mhm.
hard to integrate in these modern times. And his third rule is leave room for holy envy. In other words, be open to perhaps accepting that other traditions, other ways of thinking, other belief systems have something positive in them, and that you might want to integrate yourself into your worldview.
Yeah. Those are such 3 great principles of the work we do here at IGR and yeah, just going out into the world and talking to people.
Mhm.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much, Norm, for being on the show today and for sharing your story with us. And thanks to you for joining us. And we'll see you next time on Believe It or Not. Bye now.
I feel like it's not long enough.
Well, if you've got more ideas, feel free to share them. If not,
Okay.
that's okay.